Hey, welcome to Sunday Rants. I am your host, James Arnsberger, and we're going to get right into Sunday Rants. We are August 8th, and I think part of what we're going to try to do in this edition is frame it a little bit more in the discussion and talking about jury nullification as a principle, in particular in the process of a criminal trial. So, simply put, jury nullification is a case where a jury or any member of the jury in a criminal trial takes on the role with the authority to decide both the facts and the law, irrespective of the instructions of the judge. And the criminal justice system in general, judges specifically, prosecutors more particularly, do not like jurors who run amok and exercise nullification. This is a case where you refuse to uphold the law or apply the law in a given case beyond just the simple mere reasonable doubt. A good example are cases where people have been charged and put on trial for cultivating marijuana, medical marijuana. We had a case in La Mesa back in the 90s, resulted in an acquittal, in large part to jury nullification, and the jury refused to uphold the law. Where this gets a little bit more controversial, I think, is when we're talking in criminal cases involving murder, people that are serving life sentences with no parole for these kinds of crimes, and where we see that a good number, in fact, thousands of these cases of exonerations already that have happened for wrongful convictions, you have to ask yourself, well, how was it that the jury got it wrong if later the individual that was convicted was later exonerated? And that gets into a whole discussion about just how broken the criminal justice system really is. It's a joke. I mean, if it weren't so serious and so many people's lives hanging in the balance, it would be comical. But it's not. It's not anything close to being funny. And so when we talk about jury nullification, what we're talking about is basically ignoring what the judge tells you and taking on the role as the last check and balance against a system that is an abject failure in terms of criminal justice or finding the truth. I think it's more a case of closing the case and getting a conviction in a lot of cases than it has anything to do with a search for truth or the application of holding somebody accountable. And I think jury nullification has a rich history going back hundreds of years. And we can find many cases, both in civil and mainly in criminal cases, where a juror or a group of jurors on a trial have refused simply to uphold the law. Back in the day, there were cases even where the juries did this at their own peril. Fortunately, today, there's little that can be done by the judge. If you as a juror, member of the jury, decide that you're not going to apply the law in a particular case, and I say this with a little bit of marked hesitation in that you've got to look at the criminal trial process and ask some real fundamental questions. you're not going to see all the evidence because of all of the procedural shenanigans and hoops and bounds that go around. The trial is supposed to be a search for truth, and the defendant is supposed to enjoy the presumption of innocence, and the state bears the burden beyond a reasonable doubt to prove to a jury that this person charged and on trial is guilty of these crimes. Getting that outcome is quite a different kettle of fish, in that you have prosecutorial misconduct, you have judges that sort of navigate the trial toward a certain direction. You can see this in many cases. I don't need to tell you anything that you can't research for yourself. Some judges have been removed for such shenanigans, as rightly they should be. The problem that we have is that we have a jury system and a criminal justice system that is barely held together with baling wire and duct tape, in the way that it does not work and continues to fail, exampled by the thousands of cases of exonerations of people serving life sentences, sitting on death row, 75% of which were African American, and a criminal justice system that just is completely broken. So I am of the opinion and advocate that one should educate oneself about how jury nullification works, why it's important, why our founding documents and founding fathers in their wisdom created a system that serves as sort of a final check and balance, if you will, against a government and a system of the government, the criminal justice system, that in some degree is corrupt, is replete with misconduct, have people who work in that system that have no business at all being anywhere close to the criminal justice system, from bad cops, bad investigators, bad experts, bad witnesses that were coerced, bad prosecutors, bad investigators, bad judges. The ones that are good, they're good. They're doing their job. That's what they get paid for. But the ones that are bad should be thrown to the curb as fast as possible, because when you look at the last couple of decades and the thousands of people that were wrongfully convicted and have been exonerated, I'm not, this is not people that say that they are innocent. We've got tens of thousands of more that are still sitting in prison all over this country, here in California especially, that are proclaiming their innocence. And it's almost an impossibility to even find a way. Once you're convicted, you're done. And that's another tragedy of how broken this system is. This is one of the reasons why I and many people like myself are losing every day more and more faith and more confidence in a system that is held together by a bunch of people that are corrupt and that is broken and that don't want to do the right thing and go back and relook at a case, and then you get told when you try to do that you haven't met a high enough burden. Well, the burden is so high that nobody could meet it. So you've got to ask yourself, how do we fix a system that is so bad that it can turn out thousands of cases where people were wrongfully convicted and have now been exonerated, and tens of thousands more that are still sitting in prison? And you have to ask yourself, well, how many of those went to jury trials? and start looking at the composition of the jury, start looking at the evidence that was put before the jury. I mean, it's like, where do you even start in this mess? So for me, I think one of the reasons that motivated and drove a lot of the desire to put together not only the Sunday Rants, but the Calfeja nonprofit organization was to begin again what we were doing back in the early 90s, championing the education of the average citizen in every community possible around this country, starting here in California and more specifically here in San Diego, to educate everyone about the important role that we play when we get called for jury duty. I don't think anybody would be surprised if I told you that when most people get a jury summons notice to serve on a jury, they're looking at all the exclusions, going down the list of finding out a way that they can avoid serving on a jury. And I think that's, I don't know what it is. It's unfortunate to some degree because the last thing that I think that we need, and we've had calls for this in the past, are professional juries. That's the last thing that we need. There's another group of malcontents that we're going to form called professional juries that will probably be just as corrupt as some of the other people that are in the criminal justice system that are already corrupt. So no, I don't favor professional juries. I prefer a jury of peers from our own community for the accused who stands trial, with the burden heavily placed where it should be on the state to prove beyond a reasonable doubt, not all doubt, but a reasonable doubt, and stop manipulating and stop in the process of jury selection, stop kicking people off the jury based on race or their background or any other bias that is built in. The problem that we have is that we have human beings being human. And so as good as our system may be, it's only as good as the weakness of the human being being human, driving whatever motivations that they have for their career or their conviction count or God only knows what, their sloppy police work or investigation work. And I'm not faulting the good cops and the good investigators and the good prosecutors. I'm talking about the idiots and the asshats that have no business being in this system, putting people behind bars for the rest of their life, and have impunity and immunity from any consequence. So we've got to start looking at part of where we, the people in our community, can make a difference in a criminal justice system that is an abject failure. There's no polite way to say that. It's broken. I think we all know it's broken. You only have to look to the statistics to see how many people have been wrongly convicted and read the same studies that I've been reading for the last year and however many months. To come to the realization that there's a whole industry built around conviction and warehousing people in prison. And it has nothing to do with the search for truth, and it has nothing to do with protecting a defendant's rights. It's all about an industry of a bunch of people that don't really care one way or the other than what it does for their particular career. When you're serving on a jury, it'd be probably a good idea not to even make any mention that you know anything about jury nullification, but I invite you, go to our website right there at the bottom, scrolling there. Go Google jury nullification, history of jury nullification. Do a little self-study and education, and educate yourself about the rich history. during the pre-Civil War and Civil War era, the Anti-Fugitive Slave Act, the Fugitive Slave Act, and people that were abolitionists refused to convict people that were harboring runaway slaves. That's a great example in our history, as tragic as it's been, where people did stand up and refuse to uphold the law. If the law so bothers our conscience, or how it's being applied, or how it's being misapplied, we have no duty or obligation to uphold the law, irrespective of what the judge might say or might not say. That's just a simple fact and a simple reality. The judge can give all the instructions until they're blue in the face, and at the end of the day, they can't direct your verdict and can't call for a special verdict. And if you say not guilty, then it's not guilty, period. Short of, tampering with the jury, which you're not allowed to do. I just tell people, if it bothers your conscience that you've got some defendant on trial and the cop seems like he's lying, and he probably is, you have no obligation to do anything except not guilty. Reasonable doubt is kind of a fuzzy gray area that you can hang a lot of hats on when it comes to a criminal trial. I'm not talking about pressing the envelope past reasonable doubt, but I am talking about asking different questions, looking at different motivations, who all the players and actors are, because as you're sitting there on the jury, you don't have all the facts. You don't have all the information. You never will, never have, and going in the future, probably never will ever have everything. The system is just this whole maze of procedural gamesmanship with lives hanging in the balance and no interest in ferreting out the truth, let alone any sense of justice, when we can put several thousand people in prison that were later exonerated. And then we say that we have, to the world, that we have the best criminal justice system in the world. Tell that to the people that served 29 to life and got out of prison after 30 years of being wrongfully convicted. I don't think that they would agree that we have the best criminal justice system in the world. They would probably strongly disagree and tell you it's one of the worst in the world. But that being said, educate yourself not only about the concepts of jury nullification and its history, but ask yourself, if you were accused of a crime and you were on trial, you only need one juror to say no, and the prosecutor needs all 12 to say yes. I'd put my fate in the hands of 12 men and women before I put it in the hands of any judge or prosecutor. That's for damn sure. And, the problem is that we as a community have to confront certain realities about police misconduct, about prosecutorial misconduct, about a criminal justice system that is racially biased against minorities. And, this whole notion of equal justice under the law, it's a great aspiration. But I got to tell you, it's pathetic how short we fall coming even close to being able to live up to that aspiration. When you look at these statistics and look at these are real people spending real time and having their lives really destroyed for something that they didn't do. And we sit here and pontificate about, the big picture and how, we're all trying to do a better job and we're going to have post-conviction review. That's all, to me, that's all blah, blah, blah. Talk to the hand, because until you actually admit that your prosecutors in your office, you have a number of which have no business being in that office, being prosecutors, take away their immunity so that they have a real consequence when they suborn perjury or coerce a witness or hide evidence. Let them go on trial for some of the crap that they do, and see how they like the criminal justice system that they try to support. I would venture to say that they would not enjoy it very much. So anyway, jury nullification, that's sort of the focus of CalFIJA. Wrongful convictions is another focus. And you've got to ask yourself this last and final question. But for the jury that convicted them that did not exercise, maybe they wouldn't have spent a day in prison. And I bet a good number of those juries in those cases of exoneration, you could find at least one that wanted to vote not guilty, but was pressured into voting guilty. I bet you could find at least one in every case, if not more. So until we as a community come together and understand that the power rests invested in us as the citizenry, and we are the last check against a tyrannical government and a system that is just an abject failure, we're going to keep getting the same bullshit results that we've been getting for the last 50 years or more. So that's all I've got to say on that topic. Have a great Sunday evening. Enjoy your next week. We'll have more to say next week on Sunday Rants. And other than that, take care and peace out.